My name's Rusty Sitton. I'm the Redneck boat guy. I build two-cylinder racing outboard boats. I build the props to go on them, and we also sell a 33-foot catamaran named See Y'all Later. Hope you enjoy the channel. Well, this is Rusty again, back in Redneck Garage. It finally warmed up enough where I could get back outside. So, I've been thinking about some of the props that talking about high rake and low rake and all that. And it occurred to me that most boat racers know about tilting their motor for the right trim, right? But if you've got a high rake, you're going to trim it a little bit different than if you got a low rake prop. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you here about. And I'm going to throw in some stuff too about what it takes to run a lot of tuck on a runabout and make it run good. We run a lot of tuck, and it helps us in the corners, but it doesn't slow us down so much in the straightaways. And I try to explain that a little bit about how I got that set up. I made a little jig here, and I'll show that to you, and we'll set it up on the boat and look at some trim options. I'm going to take the time to do this because instead of hauling a big old heavy motor around, this will give us a nice representation, easy thing to move. I want to talk about again rake angles of the prop, especially on the runabout, how to set it up the way I think is best on the runabout to go as fast as you can and be good in the straightaways and around the course. So let's get into it. I want to talk about a couple of things. One, a high rake prop versus a low rake prop, right? So if you look at this blade, the center of the hub, the tip, there's not a lot of blade behind the center of that hub right there. But on this one, most of the blade is behind the center of the hub, isn't it? So that's a high rake prop. And what we talked about before was that I think I'd mentioned in a previous video, that if you put a high rake prop on and you don't tuck it, what's going to happen is if you're running a high rake prop and it's kicked, man, that's going to accentuate that rake, and it may not help you much. First of all, if you need a high rake to lift the bow, you better not be having to kick it out to lift the bow too, or you got a real problem with your boat. So with a high rake, you can run a little bit more tuck than you normally run with a low rake. So because it puts the bottom of the blade more parallel to the line of thrust. So what I want to talk about a little bit is boat setup and boat height. And let's look at something. I know I'm speaking to a wide audience here. A lot of guys, boat racers, know all about this, and but I've got a lot of guys that don't, guys getting into the industry and maybe don't really think about or realize how to set a motor on and what happens when you tilt it out or go up or down. And that's what this little jig here, I'm gonna attempt to show you. I got a little slot cut in it here, and I got it to where I can move it in and out. So what I want to do is I want to set this thing up at about the right height that I run and discuss the differences in what happens when you kick it out, or what happens, or some advantages I've found when you tuck it under. First of all, when I did my straightaway run, I'll show you how I had it set up. Just for straightaways, of course, I had this boat set up for that. You can't do it with most boats, but I ran it super high. Let me see if I can get it set up here. It's gonna be pretty close as far as height goes. I ran it super high and super tucked, something like that. And if you look at this thing, let's see, where's a little piece of wood? If you look at this center line right here, you see where it hits that boat right there? That's above the bottom of the center of the it's above the bottom of the boat. So what, and you can only do this in straightaways. You can't do it in round-and-round racing because you got to have more lower unit in the water. But what I accomplished was I was skiing that lower unit on the bottom. And that made more speed for me than anything, the ability to ski that lower unit. Now, you can't just go out there and do that on any boat. You got to have a boat that's built for it. And one of the reasons this boat's built for it and works okay, I don't have any V in that boat. It's flat all the way across, right? All the way up. If you were to do this on a V-bottom boat where the front of the pad starts a V, it's going to drive that V down in the water in it. So you're going to be pushing water with a V up there rather than a flat bottom boat. And this boat is flat all the way forward. So I can roll it up on its nose a little bit, and it's still on a nice flat speedy surface. Also, one of the things that worked out for me was, I'm using about a 2 foot long pad, 16 inches, 2 foot pad, 2 foot long. And then it rolls up gradually, right, all the way to the front. And what would happen, and it worked out really nice, is no matter how high the waves were, if they were little bitty waves, the boat would set down real flat because the waves would be hitting, I don't know, a couple or 3 feet in front of that break, and it'd set right there. But if the chop was twice that high, it's hitting on up further forward, and that's lifting that boat a little bit. It'll find its own attitude with a nice smooth round from the pad forward, and that's what I found out if you don't have a V in it. Now 99.9% of the runabouts you see have a V bottom front, and it's to help it turn and run in rough water, come into it and be able to dive into a turn. And that's what we're working on this boat, is trying to make it get into a corner like a V bottom does, and still have the ability to tuck the motor quite a bit, because that's what the boat was actually designed for. Now let's look at some engineering facts here. What's happening if that's the bottom of the boat, right? If the front end of the motor, the front end of the lower unit is your drag, right? That's where most of the drag is, and the rear end is where your thrust is. Which one do you want most in the water if you want to go fast? Well, you want the thrust in the water, don't you? So that's what I come up with. I said, let's get as much drag out of it as we can, and look how deep that prop is. Heck, I'm too deep there. I could probably come out some, and let's see here. Yeah, I could probably come out some and still be all right. But I probably did run a little bit higher than this, because I ran the top of the prop nut was above the bottom of the boat. And in the round racing, what I have found is the top of the prop nut plus about 1/8 of an inch. Because, you can measure the back of the center point and all that. There's gauges, pecker checkers to do that. But I always just kind of looked at the top of that prop nut because I could get a line of sight on it. It was always easier for me to look at it. But, I don't know, everybody is on. You get up under there and measuring and all that, and you can get off a little bit. For me, I can get back here and look at that, and all right, that's the center of the shaft, and the top of the prop nut's right there. All right, that's even with the bottom of the boat. All right, we'll go out there and test, and if it's too loose, right, if it doesn't have enough grip in the back end and it's blowing out on me, well, I'm gonna come down on that, And like I say, with Yamatos and even with the 1621 gears, I would normally run 1/8 of an inch above the top of the prop nut. And there's different size prop nuts, and I understand that. Some of them are bigger, some of them are littler, but a normal nut that goes on a 9/16 shaft, that's what I always did. I always ran the same equipment, so that was my kind of go-to thing. But if you understand that if you can put less drag in the water and more thrust in the water, that's always going to be a better thing. So the old style runabouts, especially the ones that are heavy in the front and you got to kick them out to lift, you got a situation like this, and they're deeper. Let's see if I can push that down deeper without. No, I gotta release this a little bit. Let's go deeper, like that. Tighten it back up. All right, so if you got to get the top of the prop nut even with the bottom of the boat, now look how much deeper you've got to run, and all of this drag is down in here. I'm really not deep enough yet to run it, to make it show what the old De Silvas and everybody used to have to do to get enough bow lift to where that boat would run, because they'd have to kick that motor out on the runabout. You know, a hydro, you can build lift in a hydro with compression. You know, that's not a big deal. But here in a runabout, you can't do that. You just got a flat bottom. So if you're running like this and you look at it again, you're about the right height back here, right? But look how much lower unit you're dragging in the water up here. See that right there? What that's doing is, and that's also tilted down. So what if your nose comes up like that? What if the nose comes up a little bit? Well, when it does that, this lower unit looking down, it'll go right in. You know, it'll go right under. But what if it was way under there like that? And of course it'd be a lot higher. Let me see if I think I can do something here. Instead of going up and down on that, just put me a shim under it like we do. Need a bigger shim, don't I? Here, let's use this paintbrush right here. All right, move that out of the way. All right, let's get up high. Like I was running. Yeah. That's almost enough. But anyway, with it tucked under like that, look at it now. You got way more prop in the water than you got drag. And when it's tucked under like that, guess what happens when a boat tries to come up, right? When it tries to lift like that, you skid this bottom. So you got more water pressure underneath right there. And also, where's your water holes at? They're usually right in here somewhere, aren't they? So you can run real high and shove that water right in the lower unit. And now if you're a Yamato, where's your water pickup? They're back here, aren't they? Well, that puts that prop lower in the water, doesn't it? So it'll grab more water. The key is to get that prop the right height, and then the rest of it is to get the boat where it'll work with your trim. And if you're designing your own boat, look real hard at making that boat be able to lift the front end by itself. And that's one of the reasons I made such a long boat, 11'7", is I wanted a lot of natural compression under there as much as I could, and no V. Wanted it flat where it'd get up there and have a little bit of air packing. You know, you can't pack air on a runabout. You can't trap it, but you can dang sure run on top of it if it's there. So that's trim, and that's one of the tricks I think that people need to know about if they're really going for a straightaway record or whatever, is get them a boat that'll run high enough in the front end to where you can tuck it a lot. And one of the things I had mentioned before when I was talking about runabout design was, you know, in this situation where you're tucked a lot and you're wide open on the throttle, that's driving that nose down in it. Now, of course, if this was a high rake prop, you look, that's a lot straighter up, right, than it would be if you were kicked out. If you're kicked out like that, look how kicked that high rake prop is, and that's what I was talking about. You got to have the right prop for the right thing. If you were, well, like I say, if you have to go high rake and have to kick out, you need to change boats. That's all I got to tell you, because you're not shoving the water forward, you're shoving it up in the air trying to make the boat work. So build your boat where it'll work, set it up where with the right prop combination, with the right pitch, but rake as well. So another thing I wanted to talk about on boat setup is, you know, a lot of times, let me get another paintbrush here. A lot of times, you know, okay, we need to raise that motor. Well, when you do that, when you raise the motor, if you just go straight up, that's cool. It doesn't change any angle or whatever. But look at the back of this thing right here, and we talked about that already kind of, is when you go out with it, it's raising that prop. So it might, if you're too deep and you want to go up some more, you might try just a little kick out, because the mechanical from here to here, as you can see, it goes a lot deeper or a lot higher based just on trim angle. So it's not just putting shims under it. You can get a little bit more or a little bit less prop in the water by how much angle you got. So if it's blowing out a little bit and you don't really want to mess with your shims, hey, you can go under a little bit, can't you? And that'll drop that prop in the water. It'll make your skeg more effective because you're packing a little bit around it. So that's a good thing. Good thing to know is you don't have to go up. The first thing to do is try going down just a little bit instead of, hey, I need to take the whole motor loose. Drop it down and run the same kick out. So that's my advice on trim. I made this little jig to demonstrate the fact that not only is it faster to tuck it, you can change your trim angle, the height of your prop, just with the in and out kick. I wanted to show that. I wanted to be able to represent that. Now, like I say, most boat racers know that, but hey, you know, a lot of new guys getting into the sport or guys that might want to get into the sport, you know, they don't know that kind of stuff. So I made this because it was a lot easier to hassle with than a big old motor, put a motor on it. And I hope that helped you a little bit. Like I say, the difference in the rake of the props, this prop here has got almost no rake in it. So if you tuck that prop under, look what it's doing down here in the bottom. Now the bottom is where it's really powerful, right? Because the bottom is where the water is, because the prop's half out of the water, right? So the bottom blade is what you look at. So if you look at that one tucked away under, it's trying to lift the back of the boat. It's trying to put your nose down even more, right? And you don't want that if you're real tucked. What you want if you're real tucked is to have a medium or a high rake prop that when it's tucked like that, that prop is running at a neutral rake or very close to a neutral rake. You can have, that's one of the adjustments that you can make if you're trying to run tucked, mess with try different raked props. And the more tuck you got, the more rake you can have, because essentially you're tucking it under there and that prop is shoving straight off the back end, and straight off the back end thrust, it drives the boat forward. If it's having to throw water in the air or down like this would be, if this one was down, throwing water down like that, that's loss of horsepower. You need to throw that water straight back. This prop ideally would have to run either straight or a little bit out because of the low rate of it for it to work. Now, some hydros, you know, like a big 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder hydro, they may want a little bit of transom lift. And if that's the case, you could run this thing tucked and it would blow water off the end a little bit. But again, when we were talking about props, I don't like blowing water off the end of the blade to get transom lift. There's another way to do it. Up in here, you can build a nice heavy pitch to where when that blade comes in the water, it'll jack that motor out, and it's much more controllable than trying to do it with these tips, because when it hits the water, if it's blowing off the tip, it's pushing the prop this way in it. And then when it goes down there, it's pushing it this way. And at the bottom, yeah, it's lifting it, all right? But over here, it's pushing it that way in it. So it's a real weird situation when you're trying to run them off the tips. And I think it's always better on full top end to drive that water straight off the back of the prop, straight as you can. So to run a high rake, tuck that motor. And realize too that, like you say, if you're a little bit loose or if you're a little bit high, instead of dropping that motor down, try just a little bit of tuck it just a little bit like that. And that'll put that prop down in the water a little bit deeper without having to move your height set up. And you know, I've had people run in and say, man, I had the same sticks under it, but now it's blowing out. Well, there's a couple of reasons that can happen too. You get out, water's different. You know, you run on salt water, that water's a lot more dense. Man, you got to run a different prop altogether if you're running on salt water as you do if you're in the Ozark Mountains where you can see the bottom in 20 feet. Man, I went up there to the race in Arkansas, and I didn't have a prop tall enough that'd hold on to that water, man. It was all over the place. I didn't understand. It took me a while of thinking about it. Well, that water's not dense enough, so I had to run deeper where I could get a bite on the water a little bit. So water quality how many particulates are in that water means a whole lot about how high you can run. Of course, the conditions on the day have a whole lot to do with it, but I wanted to share that with you because like I say, a new guy, he never has been exposed to this, and I took the time to make this a little jig to show you some of the things I've been thinking about, and I hope that helps somebody.